Hi, today we are in the Bill.com office in Palo Alto with René. René, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, well, my name's René Lacerte. I'm the founder and CEO of Bill.com. Prior to this, I started a company called PayCycle, which did online payroll for small businesses. We grew that to about 100,000 businesses and sold that to Intuit. I'm a fourth generation entrepreneur, learned from dad and granddad that cash is king.
Yeah.
You got to stretch out the payables and pull in the receivables. And the way I came up with Bill.com, which I haven't told you yet what we do, is that I was trying to do exactly what dad and granddad taught me when I was running PayCycle, and there were no tools that helped me do it. So we help businesses automate their payables, automate their receivables, and ultimately we give them freedom so that they can actually focus on the real things that are important for their business. So by automating the payables and receivables and all the workflow around it and all the payments and all the transactions, syncing that with all the applications that they work with, it removes a tremendous burden from them and really helps them grow their business. So we hear that all the time.
What did your dad teach you?
Dad taught me so many things. But at the core of Dad, he never gave up. My dad he was born with a disability. He had 4 fingers on his left hand and 2 on his right, and nobody would teach him to play the piano, so he taught himself.
Okay.
And there's just all sorts of examples like that where he was a fabulous musician. He was playing trumpet when he was a kid, and then he moved to piano. And one year, 1977, Chuck Mangione came out with a song called "Feels So Good," and he heard it on the radio, and he just went out and he bought a flugelhorn and he was playing it the next day, and it sounded just as good as Chuck. But if you apply that personal stuff, that's the way it was at work. Like, he just never gave up. Like, he was persistent. If he was passionate about something, if he really believed in it, he was just persistent and just focused, and he just delivered. He just really focused that when you care about something, it is worth fighting for, and you don't listen to the detractors. You just kind of focus on what you know you're capable of, and you just do it. So that's probably the most important lesson that I learned from Dad. I learned lots of tactical things about how important it is to manage your cash flow and how important it is to have, obviously good benefits for employees. But all that stuff, really at the core, building a product and starting a company, you just got to persevere and actually focus and get it done.
Great. Reminds me of the book Poor Dad, Rich Dad a little bit.
Yeah.
How did you come up with the idea of Bill.com?
Yeah, so with Bill.com, I was running the day-to-day of PayCycle. I had been a product manager at Intuit, where I'd actually worked on consumer bill payment for Intuit. And I was finding that all the paperwork that was coming, we had a check run every Friday, I just couldn't manage it. I was unhappy, I was angry, I was kind of frustrated that all this paper stuff came to my desk, and yet it didn't have all the answers I needed to make decisions. Mm-hmm. So when you're making payment decisions, this gets back to what Dad and Granddad taught, which is to stretch out the payables and to pull in the receivables. You need information, you need context, you need a lot of content to actually make a decision. What does the contract say? When did I pay them last? What do my employees say? Does my marketing head believe this is a good expense or not? Maybe I want to ask them why they did this, because I might want to learn what's going on in the business. All those questions require collaboration. Mm-hmm. And so I just was kind of fixating on the fact that none of the tools that I had either built or looked at competitively at Intuit allowed me to actually do what I needed to do. It didn't allow me to collaborate with the people, which would be the employees, the customers, the vendors, the accountants. It didn't allow me to collaborate with the documents, everything from a source document all the way up to the clear check image. It didn't allow me to collaborate with my accounting systems or my banking systems, so I could have secure, disaster-proof, so to speak, backup office capabilities. I didn't have any of that functionality out there, and so I just started thinking about it. It's like, this cloud thing's pretty collaborative. I bet you I can kind of think about how I could actually make the transaction go from a payables to receivables and back without having to do any data entry on either side. So that's kind of how I started thinking about it, and realized there was an opportunity to give people the right access at the right time with the right information using the cloud, which would allow for all that mundane paperwork that people have, would allow that to disappear.
And how did you make your first product version reality? And so did you hire some kind of developers helping you for this? Did you raise money upfront or finally after you had the prototype? How did it work?
I was fortunate in that we had, because of the success of PayCycle, I was able to raise money fairly easily from existing investors at PayCycle that just wanted to put some money in. And I would recommend this. I did this at PayCycle, and I did it at Bill.com, and I'll do that in the next startup. you can do a prototype fairly easily, right? And no technology. In fact, our original prototype was, I would walk down to the businesses that we signed up. I would actually take their bills for them. I would scan them. I would actually then attach them in email and route them for other people to approve. I would then, take care of printing the checks or moving the money electronically. I would do all that stuff manually so that we could learn what we needed to build out in the system with the engineers. So it didn't actually take much money to get an alpha version out, but it does take time to build a payments company. It's not easy work to manage and build payments companies.
So it was more hard to really understand where the pain point is, but not developing the first prototype and solution.
Well, the pain point, I would say what was hard was actually figuring out how to scale the solution, right? The understanding the pain point was actually something I knew, just from running the business at PayCycle. And then getting to the prototype was fairly easy. And then we knew what features we needed to build to actually, enable that pain point to go away. And so then it was, okay, how do you build a scalable system that enables those features? And that's been hard. That's what we've been doing for 7 years.
Right, great.
So.
René, let's talk about the business model.
Okay.
How does the business model work right now? Can you walk us through from a customer perspective?
Yeah, so the customers, we have multiple types of products. We have an accounts payable automation tool, and we have an accounts receivable automation tool. So customers come to us for one or either or both of those. And when they come in, there is a software subscription model where they need to pay us for basically a license per user. And the license fee depends on the complexity of the business. So the more complex the business is, the more sophisticated their accounting software is, the more sophisticated their needs are, the more expensive the product is. But that price range is anywhere from $29 a month all the way up to, I think, $79 a month. And then we have transaction fees. So every time we enable a customer to fulfill a transaction, whether it's paying their vendor or collecting their receivable, we charge $1.49 for any paper transactions and 49 cents for any electronic transactions. So there's other fees, but those are the dominant transaction fees that we have. And what we find is that customers quickly get on the system and then are able to really save a ton of money. Our customers tell us they save anywhere from 50 to 75% of the time, and they get paid 2 to 3 times faster. So the ROI is actually very, very high, and they see that and they get that. So the building of the business model seems to be one of the simpler problems for us to solve.
The old payment process of paying your suppliers, from my understanding, works like this, that in a small company, the accounting department collects all the, let's say, the contracts that you made with the suppliers, so you know when to pay them, what are the DPOs and payment dates. And then the managing director also signs them, okay, yeah, this one please pay it, or this one, or maybe we should renegotiate the price, etc. This is what I would call the old model. How does your model work and improve this kind of process?
So the model that we have is I guess at the core of any business transaction is what I term, it's kind of obvious, but collaboration. Businesses collaborate with the people, the systems, and the documents. And so what you just said, there's actually a fair bit of collaboration there. What we do is we digitize everything so that collaboration becomes instantaneous, right? So I can collaborate with my phone. I can actually look at a bill and see the exact same digital copy that you're looking at, and at the same time even, right? And as soon as you approve it, it can then go to me to approve. If you have a question about it, saying, hey, René, I'm not really sure that, this is exactly, what we said, then I can make a note and reply back why it is or why it changed or whatever. So that instant ability to have workflow built into all the transactions, and also provide an audit trail so you can see who's looked at something and if they've approved it and if it's been initiated for payment and all that good stuff. That type of systemic integration makes for a lot simpler collaboration tool with all the people that you work with, as well as all the documents. Part of the reason I started the company is at PayCycle we had one big filing cabinet with all the vendor and customer records in it, right? So 2 people had a key, the general counsel and myself. So I would be paying a bill or looking for an invoice to collect on. I go back to the cabinet and I'd open up the filing cabinet and I'd go pull out the file that should have the contract in it that I'm looking for, and you'd open it up and it'd be empty, right? Because somebody else needed to look at it and had replaced it. And now we had to run around the office and find, where's that copy of the contract? Nobody had it, right? So the document should be centralized and it should be tied to the transactional stuff, because from a financial perspective, the managing director, the CEO, the owner of the business, the controller, the CFO, whoever it is signing the checks, they need access to that data quickly, and that's what we do.
Who's digitizing the contracts then? Is it the company, your client, or is it you that are supporting them in digitizing this contract?
It's mostly them. The reason I say mostly is that we give our customers the ability to fax a document in. So that creates a digital copy. So every customer gets their own fax number, every customer gets their own email address. So vendors or customers, anybody can just email a document in to that particular address. Anybody can fax a document into that fax number, and in addition, you can take a picture with the phone and send it in that way, or upload it from a file on your machine. So all the documents come in that way, and then once they're in, then we start the workflow. We do the data entry if you ask us to. We start the payment processing. We have all the security and audit trails that I talked about.
How's the interconnection between Bill.com and the typical accounting systems like SAP and Oracle? Is there some kind of automation link between them?
Yeah, so the accounting systems that we primarily work with would be Intuit's QuickBooks, QuickBooks Online, Intact, NetSuite, Xero. We do have customers using us with Mass 90, Great Plains. I don't think we have anybody with Oracle, SAP. Those tend to be much, much larger companies, kind of the Fortune 2000. And in the United States, right, there's 6 million businesses with employees, 6 million employers, and that kind of tends to be our focus. And they tend to use those first 5 that I mentioned. So our belief is that the accounting software is a tremendous tool that gives you the data and the ledger and the reporting that you need around how to look at and analyze your business. But when it comes to actually understanding your payables and receivables, they don't have the process workflow that we have. So we are a tool that works side by side with the accounting system. And so we have partnerships and integrations with each of those applications. And our customers typically will sync the data from the accounting software into Bill.com in the initial day or whatever, and they will take over all the list items, the customers, the vendors, the chart of accounts, the expense categories, all that stuff will come over. And then from there, once they put the documents in, they can categorize it in Bill.com, and then we just sync back and forth. If they add a vendor, it goes over to QuickBooks. If they add a customer, it goes over. All that stuff just automatically gets integrated and synced in a seamless fashion, so that the customer doesn't have to worry about their books being accurate. And so accountants, it's one of the things accountants love, is that they can actually have their clients involved in Bill.com, but not necessarily involved in the accounting software, which is where they can kind of make mistakes.
René, your domain is, I think, too good to be true.
Yeah.
How did you get that?
A little bit lucky. The CTO, Eric, had a friend, Mark Benioff from Salesforce, and Mark Benioff owned the URL. And so Mark had stayed connected to Eric, and after about a year of working here, had kind of asked Eric a little bit more about what we were doing. When he heard what we were doing, he was like, I've got a URL that might be appropriate. And so we went and talked about the business, and as a friend, he did us a favor and sold it to us. So it was good.
Okay, let's talk about the corporate strategy. So what do you think is the competitive advantage of Bill.com over other software as a service companies that might also streamline the accounting process or payables and receivables process?
I think the core advantage that we have, the primary challenge that there is in building what we've done, is that the name is a good segue. So the reason I ended up buying Bill.com, originally the company was Cashview, which in some ways is more descriptive about what we actually do, but Bill.com is too good to pass up, because Bill.com represents two sides of the same coin, the payables and the receivables process. And that's like, if you think about a quarter, there's head and there's tails, but it's a quarter, right? And so we are two sides of the same coin. It's the transaction that businesses use to communicate and transact across. That transaction, if you really want to make it electronic and really want to create the collaboration across it, you need to both do the payables part, you need to do the receivables part, you need to create the collaborative tools for customers and vendors, you need to create the payments that need to happen back and forth, you need to sync with either type of accounting system. If you're on QuickBooks and I'm on Intact, if you're on NetSuite and I'm on Xero, all that stuff just needs to kind of go together. And so at our core, we've always had a data model that represents that it is both, the transaction is either a payable or a receivable, but it's actually both at the same time. So I think that's one of the bigger barriers to entry. The other barrier to entry is money movement. We're one of the few companies that actually does the money movement and actually processes the transactions and manages the fraud risk and the credit risk and all the things that come with money movement. And that is really, really hard stuff to do. And in this particular regulatory environment since 2008 in the United States, it's gotten a lot harder to do those activities. And so and we have a lot more costs and expense that we are putting into the system to kind of manage and work with regulators. And that's not something that I think most startups should be doing, because it's actually fairly expensive and fairly risky.
Mm-hmm. And did you think of moving towards supplier management and towards the trade receivables management or debtor management in terms of selecting the right debtors or suppliers, managing them, building this kind of database?
So we believe that the network that we have that connects customers and vendors together, right? The payables receivables connection ultimately does create a supplier network, if you will. But it's going to be different than the Ariba's or the trade shows. It's going to be different than that, because we think that most businesses, and you look at the U.S., right? In the U.S., the top 4,000 companies in the U.S. create 70% of the consumer bills, right? So consumers only have to talk to 4,000 companies to be able to get everything electronic. Mm-hmm. It's a much simpler problem than you think about the 29 million businesses that the U.S. has, right? So we believe that the network that needs to that will solve the problem is going to be one that creates some transparency no matter your size. And so I think it's just a different way of approaching the problem. So we haven't gone after go get the top 5,000 billers, and which is Ariba's kind of got the top 1,000, right? Yeah. And then they've gone out to all of their network. It's a great strategy, but I think it's ours is to say, well, let's make sure this works for anybody and anyone at any time.
Okay, great. Let's talk about the market development in the payment industry and the SaaS and accounting industry. So what kind of trends can you identify specifically related to the accounting department?
I think one of the things that I'm seeing, there's kind of three big trends in general, right? There's big data, there's social or collaboration is what I think it translates to in the business world, and then there's electronic payments. And obviously we play in all of those. I've talked about those words. What's interesting is this, when we first, when I did PayCycle, when it was an internet payroll solution, we did not think of it as a cloud solution. We did not call it a SaaS solution. We did not think of it as the benefits that environment really provided from a customer perspective. There were benefits for us from a company building on it, right? Faster development times and better ability to kind of fix bugs, stuff like that. And now when you think about the cloud, it is kind of sharing, this phrase I use is sharing the right data with the right person at the right time, and allowing people to collaborate across all of that. And that's kind of a trend that we're seeing, is that businesses want that. They want, the CEO or the owner wants to be able to pay a bill in a taxi cab in New York City. They, or the woman who owns the business wants to be able to pay a bill while she's picking up the kids, or the dad wants to be able to pay the bill or invoice a customer while he's at the soccer game. Whatever the stereotypical role that you come up with, right? They want to be able to do this activity from anywhere, and that activity is very different than when you think about the finances of, what did I spend on this, and that, right? And so it's the instant real-time nature that business and the demands that business are getting, all business owners are being placed on today, which is business never stops, you're always connected. It is that phrase which, I've heard many times in the Valley, or maybe not many, but I use it many times, which is the noose is looser, but the leash is longer, right? Okay. That's what the internet's done for us. We're always connected, right? You've always got that leash, but I got a lot bigger rope around my neck, so I'm not going to hang myself, but I'm always connected, right? And so I think that enablement of technology is driving what businesses expect from their financial applications. They want that freedom and flexibility because everything else they do to run their business can be done from anywhere. So I think that is driving a big need in the accounting space and the finance space. And so you can't make a decision about paying a bill unless you've got all the filing cabinets, at your fingertips. There was one of my first demos I did for the demo conference in 2007. I got up on stage and I had a tool belt around my waist, and the tool belt on the tool belt I had calipers, which paper hanging off, like a whole ream of paper all the way around my waist, right? And they were all bills and invoices. Yeah. And the comment I made is like, if you wanted to have all the paper and invoices to be able to pay your bills anywhere, this is what you would have to do. Nobody's going to do this, right? You want to be able to do it on the phone.
should look very funny.
Yeah, yes, it was a good video. It was fun.
Great. René, your dad taught you so much about how to start a company and how to become a successful entrepreneur. What do you teach your two boys so they become an entrepreneur if they want?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things that we fail to do, and actually there's all these studies in the US about this, which is dinner table conversations are probably the most important thing for a successful child to become a successful adult. And so when you come home, what do you talk about at the dinner table? Everybody talks about their day. So I share very openly with the kids all the good stuff and all the bad stuff about running a company. And I explain it so they understand it. So if I'm having a challenge hiring somebody, I talk about why this role is important, what would this person do for the company, what I'm looking for, how I evaluate the person, where they've been, all that type of stuff. We kind of get into that so they can potentially learn about the people side of business, right? If I'm evaluating how to organize the company, I'll go through the organizational structure of the company. If I'm evaluating a product feature, we'll talk about, hey, I got this new idea and this is what I'm thinking about. And they'll ask questions, poke holes at it. So I think, and my dad did this with me, this is a really important thing no matter what you do. And it might be why you see actors' kids oftentimes become actors and, businessmen's kids oftentimes become businessmen, right? Or whatever. And so I think that's kind of an interesting way to kind of share that learning. So there's no one thing other than as I'm learning, I'm sharing that with the kids, right? So they get to learn a little bit of something. And that dinner table MBA, as I call it, I think is one of the more valuable educational experiences that our kids can have.
So understood this kind of educational practice that you are doing, and for some people who are not as privileged to have an entrepreneur as a daddy, what kind of advice would you give them for starting a company?
Well, the first thing is that it's always harder than you thought or think, right? It's always harder. And so just, back to the first question you asked me, which is you got to persevere. If you believe in what you're doing, you have to keep doing it. You can't let somebody else tell you, no, it's not right. That said, you should always validate, right? So if you think about the examples I gave, both at PayCycle and here, I did a PayCycle, I did payroll by hand. I filled out forms by hand. But for the customer, their experience was they got a complete internet experience. They could email me the hours. I would then create the paychecks and I would deliver it to their door because I didn't have the ability to just send it through email at that point, right? But they got that experience. And when I could see, that solved the pain point, then I knew it was worth investing. So there are ways to kind of, prototype, suss out, make sure that your customers value the pain points that you're solving before you invest, and I would recommend that. The other advice that I always tell people is really, you cannot underestimate the value of the network that you have. Do not be afraid to tap into it and ask. People can always say no. And kind of an adjunct to that is focus on developing a board of advisors, a board of directors, or something that you have to be accountable for. Everybody always thinks, it's interesting, everybody always thinks, hey, being your own business, it must be, being your own boss must be great. I am not my own boss. I work for the people above me and I work for the people below me. I'm the guy in the middle that has people all around me that I need to work with, right? And they're all telling me what to do. And now I get to set the course, but I'm listening to all of them and I'm trying to make sure they're all satisfied. And if you don't have that accountability, then it's actually very easy to say, well, I said I was going to get this product research done by next month. 3 months go by and you haven't done it. But if you have a board meeting and you have a board meeting in 6 weeks where you have to report on the product research, guess what? You'll get the product research done by 6 weeks from now, right? So I would recommend that. So I think there's probably more ideas, but those 3 tips seem like the ones that I focus on the most when I tell other entrepreneurs.
Great. René, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And the next time you want to start a company, or even better, want your kids to start a company, talk to your kids and educate them on the dinner table. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, René.